From the right, I'm Matt Lewis.
From the left, I'm Bill Scher.
And you're watching
The Week in Blog.
On this week's episode, Bill, it is drill, baby drill, and the battle for Arizona with J.D. Hayworth and John McCain. But first, the Daily Caller breaking a story this week, and we've talked about them in the past, but this is, I think, their big get. Breaking a story this week about the RNC spending money at a bondage-themed nightclub called Voyeur. Bill, what's your take on this?
Well, I'm sure that the particulars of the story has been hashed out with much glee, at least in liberal corners and on the Daily Show already. For our purposes in the Week in Blog, I'm just interested that this is really the Daily Caller's first scoop. And when they rolled out, I think we talked about their original rollout. This is Tucker Carlson's attempt to, and I believe in his words, to have a conservative news site that reports the facts. And when they first rolled out, they didn't have a big scoop in their back pocket to have a big splash with. And I was wondering if this whole project would to sort of peter out. It hadn't really gotten much buzz after the first day. And I know there are conservatives that take issue with the story. We can talk about that. But I would only say this does show that Tucker Carlson is looking to make splashes, to drive coverage, put some investment into uncovering news. This was a story that would require a little bit of shoe leather, a little bit of digging through the expense reports. So interesting to see if they can follow it up with some more. It does seem the Daily Caller might actually stick around.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It wasn't enough for them to just do opinion. Plenty of sites do opinion. Frankly, and by the way, I've written for Daily Caller. I've written opinion for Daily Caller. And so they do have an opinion component, but they need to be breaking news. They need to be reporting. And so kudos to them for that. But you're right, a lot of conservative bloggers not happy, and they're not happy stemming from what I think, and I'm going to try to be fair here, I think that the Daily Caller initially got the story wrong in a big way. Well, first of all, the whole voyeur part of it was kind of buried within the story. I almost wonder.
Do you think that was intentional?
I don't know. I wonder if they realized that this was the hook that would actually be interesting. I mean, you have to assume that people know that sex sells, and that the sex angle would be the sort of the hook, the exciting media angle, but they actually
it was not the headline of the Daily Caller story.
No, the headline was
in
about
the
a jet.
6th paragraph.
Right, exactly.
But I wonder if that was an intentional move, so other sites might think that they found the real nugget. Oh my goodness, Daily Caller buried the lead. Check this out.
It's a brilliant idea if people find it.
Right. It's risky.
But it's a risk, right? And maybe, who knows? Who knows how these things work? It's like,
or maybe it's when they botched their own story and didn't play the lead the way they thought they should have.
Maybe. Tucker Carlson's coming on my podcast April 7th. At least he's supposed to. I'm going to ask him about that. But here's where I think they got it wrong. If you read the story, which they have not corrected still, it says, Steele travels in style. A February RNC trip to California, for example, included a $9,099 stop at the Beverly Hills Hotel, $6,596 dropped at the nearby Four Seasons, and $1,620.71 spent at Voyeur, West Hollywood, a bondage-themed nightclub featuring topless women dancers imitating lesbian sex. Clearly, the implication, I don't know how you could read that and not think that Michael Steele was there. Clearly, that's the implication. And Tucker apparently denies that. He thinks that this does not imply that Michael Steele was there. Michael Steele was not there. In fact, I believe that Daily Caller subsequently reported that he was actually en route in the air in a flight from Hawaii. But Bill, tell me, does that sound to you like they're saying that Michael Steele was there? Am I wrong?
When I first read it myself, my reaction was, this sounds like Michael Steele was there, but if they knew he was there, they would have said it more explicitly. I mean, I agree with you that the way they structured that paragraph was an unfair implication.
Right.
But just because I'm a particularly savvy media reader of that, my reaction was, I bet that's not the story.
Well, it is.
If that was actually a story, it would be like in flashing lights with pictures up front.
Well, again, once on the ground, FEC filing suggests Steele travels in style, and then they go on to talk about these expenses. I think that you have to. The only logical conclusion would be that Michael Steele was there, and yet he wasn't. And so I thought it was misleading. A lot of conservative bloggers. So, by the way, let me say, I think that the fact that it's misleading, I think, is the fair criticism. I'm going to read you a series of conservative bloggers who have criticized the Daily Caller. Now, I have this list because the Daily Caller published this list, so they're actually a bit gleeful of getting. They're so happy to get attention.
Trying to mix it up.
Yeah.
Keep the buzz going.
Exactly, and so, but I think some of these deserve commentary. So let me just read a few of them, and then some of them I think deserve conversation. Dan Reel, who is an interesting blogger, he's been making
Real
a name.
Worldview.
Yes, and he's been making a name for himself as sort of a gadfly, sort of going after really everybody, willing to pick a fight, and it's getting him attention. He writes, someone should take Tucker Carlson's bow tie and shove it down his throat, provided they can get the silver spoon out of his mouth long enough. The Daily Caller is a rag, after all, picking up every piece of dirt because some backstabbing Republicans refuse to play team ball, willing to do what they can to hurt their own side because they think they're entitled to carve up the pie the way they want to. So this will be repeated, but I think that there's an implication that Tucker Carlson and Daily Caller are willing to attack their own team because they know that generates publicity. When you attack your own side, especially if you're a conservative, if you attack another conservative, you can get more publicity that way. That is true, and I think that some people exploit that, but I also think that you shouldn't be afraid to attack your own side when they deserve it. So let's lay that on the table. Another guy named William Jacobson writes, and I should find out where he's actually writing for. While this may be a legitimate news issue, it hardly fits the Daily Caller's mission statement to balance out the lack of journalistic examination of the Obama administration. The mainstream media and left-wing blogosphere, including the Huffington Post, are all over every move the RNC and Republicans make. You get where that one's going. I don't know that that's the Daily Caller's mission statement. But clearly some conservatives feel that, look, there's already the mainstream media out there attacking Republicans. Why do we need Tucker Carlson's group to do it? What's your take on that, Bill?
Well, again, Tucker said the mission of Daily Caller was to be a conservative news site that reported the facts and that there weren't enough conservative places that were doing that. He was arguing that it was going to be kind of a highbrow mission. It wasn't going to be a tabloid operation. So, on one hand, I think they've made the splash that they didn't make in the first place. On the other hand, I don't think this is really what the initial mission was. This is just doing sort of the same type of stuff that other online operations have tried to do to make a name for themselves, which is sort of get into that cable chatter mix. So it may be that he doesn't care that the original reporting was not quite accurate or had an unfair implication, that it's a rag, that he's criticizing the Republicans because it's giving him a name that the place didn't have a name for itself before. But it doesn't seem to me that's what the original stated mission of the operation was going to be.
By the way, William A. Jacobson writes at a blog called Legal Insurrection. It does not look that all that professional. He's an associate clinical professor of law, Cornell Law School, Ithaca, New York.
One of those pointy-head PhD eggheads.
That's why we can't trust him. All right, another website called Jumping in Pools writes, Tucker Carlson's conservative website released a misleading article on Michael Steele, the RNC, and Republicans in general, leaving some members of the conservative blogosphere scratching their heads in disbelief. Well, for those who have looked up Carlson's background with MSNBC, the truth was known, and Newsbusters said it best. Carlson is clearly the kind of conservative MSNBC would love. Melissa Clothier, who a few weeks ago subbed for me here on the Weekend Blog, wrote, it almost seems as if the right-leaning webzine is trying to gain credibility with liberal news outlets and is willing to do so on the backs of their own ideological brethren. Or maybe they're in the hip pocket of a conservative who doesn't like Chairman Steele. Either way, this story may be another example of the right carelessly destroying their own.
And this seems to be a charge. I mean, I promise not to mention David Frum today, so I apologize. But this does seem to be a charge that you get whenever there is a conservative that, strays, that they're doing it to get on liberal media's radar. And on one hand, I think that can be a cheap shot that can stifle, some healthy internal debate. But in this case, in the Daily Caller's case, if all you're doing is taking, a cheap shot at the RNC, I mean, I thought what Tucker Carlson wanted to do was to, fortify the conservative movement and put them on more solid factual ground when making their arguments, and to, blow up a, minor expense report deal, maybe embarrassing to Michael Steele. Maybe it pushes Michael Steele out at the end of the day. I don't think that achieves the mission that Tucker Carlson was stating for himself.
Well, that may be true, but I think that, well, Bill, so much to say here. I mean, for one thing, you may go into an enterprise with a goal of A. Maybe you get involved in music because you want to do bluegrass, and you really like Bill Monroe, and you want to be a traditionalist and do bluegrass.
But you find out you play the Toby Keith and you get the chicks.
Exactly. How did we know where this was headed?
Right.
And so, in any event, look, it may be that it's simply, and here's the thing, I'm not saying that, well, there's several sort of different degrees. Like, one degree is if you're a conservative and you attack conservatives, you get publicity. That, if someone does that, that's kind of a bad thing, because you're sort of selling out your team. But then there's the other thing that is like just salacious news gets attention. And I'm really not opposed to that. Like, the Daily Caller, like, they might write a lot of really highbrow, great stuff that isn't getting attention, but simultaneously, if one of their reporters happens to be combing through FEC reports and stumbles upon something like this, I say more power to them. I don't think there was any... Look, here's my take. Kudos to the reporter who broke the story. I think it was good reporting. I think it's actually
except for that part.
Well, exactly. Like good reporting. It was good research. In other words, had they not implied that Michael Steele was there, it would be great. Like, I don't begrudge them for going with a story that's sort of a tabloid story. I'm fine with it.
You think it's a legit story that RNC is reimbursing expenses in a place like that? That's a legit piece.
Fair game, legit, and I think worth knowing. I mean, look, the people out there who give money, and by the way, I would never give money to the RNC. I don't think I ever have. If I did, it was because I went to some dinner or something, or
where there were lesbian bondage going on.
I don't think I've ever given them a dime, and I would never give them money, knowingly. Because, and by the way, Tony Perkins from the Family Research Council said that today, or yesterday, and got press out of it for the same thing. But why would you ever give the RNC money? I'd give it to the Club for Growth first. I'd give it to candidates I believe in first. I would give it to any number of groups before I would actually ever give money to the RNC. But people do give money to them, and they deserve to know that their money went to this. And so I think that it would have been the tabloid part doesn't bother me. It's getting the fact wrong about Michael Steele being there, and I still think it was misleading, and I still think that was a mistake. But
do you think at the end of this, you noted that, or are there more criticisms you want to list first before I move on to the next topic?
No, I mean there were a few more, but let me step back here just 1 second because I did have a lot of stuff.
While you're perusing, I'll make this one. Please do. Please. One point. I wonder if the caller is on the map in such a way, whereas when Politico made a splash, I think you saw on the left, repeated pot shots taken at Politico when they felt they were being Drudge-esque in their purveying of right-leaning conventional Washington wisdom. So I wonder now if the caller is going to become a regular punching bag in the conservative blogosphere. Will conservative bloggers be constantly checking the caller to find things to complain about in an attempt to marginalize them, but actually elevating their prominence in the process?
I don't think we're to that point yet, because again, I mean, this is like one instance, and they have, like I said, I've written for Daily Caller a few times, and they've got a lot of respected, prominent conservatives who write there. I think that if this became a trend, if another story like this happened, next week, and another story happened like this a week later, then all of a sudden you're developing this narrative that I think could get out of hand and be dangerous. But I think that unless there's a trend, if this is just an anomaly, it's not a problem. Another thing that they could face is that there is a large donor who gave them $3 million to start the Daily Caller, and he's a conservative. And one can imagine that if the site evolved into something other than a conservative outlet, that it would be harder to get this gentleman to give money again. His name's Foster Freeze, by the way. And then it would be harder to get other conservative investors to invest in it. So that's, again, we have the whole ethical question about, do the people who fund, newspapers have always had this issue with advertisers, do the advertisers control the editorial content or the reporting? Well, the same thing, potentially could be true. Really, every ideological website ultimately faces that question, or could face that question. So I don't think there's any. I don't think there's any trouble now. But again, let 2 or 3 of these things happen in a row, and then all of a sudden, then there is an issue. So. The other thing that was interesting about this story, and I think there were some people, I think John Hawkins at Right Wing News, and I think even Dan Reel as well, were sort of talking about how this wasn't really that big of a deal. We have to get past the whole puritanical thing. And it is interesting. I mean, look, I live on the East Coast, but I think if you're a young person living in LA, going to a nightclub like this is probably not that unusual to us. And certainly, let me just say, certainly Republican RNC money should not be paying for it. I think we could all.
Nobody on the East Coast goes to strip clubs.
Well, no, but here's the difference, Bill. This was a really trendy, upscale, Dominatrix-themed nightclub. This wasn't like a strip club. I don't think. This is like a different scene. This is like if you watch the OC or The Hills or any of those sort of shows like that. This is where a lot of those kind of young hipster-type people would go. I'm not saying it makes it right. I'm just saying...
Your knowledge of the nuance of the strip club world fascinates me, Matt.
The funny thing is, by the way, if they had gone to a place called the Crystal City Restaurant, which didn't have the word voyeur in the title, they may have been able to expense it legitimately. But in any event, I think we've exhausted it. It is an interesting story. Keep an eye on the Daily Caller. I think this is a big splash. I think at the end of the day, it's very good for them. But there are potential dangers lurking out there if this narrative goes haywire.
Big policy story this week, I think, is the presidential decision to allow for coastal drilling on southeastern seaboard and certain parts of Alaska. It has certainly split the left, with some trying to argue that Obama is once again playing three-dimensional chess, and others saying that Obama is once again selling out to corporate interests. What is the conservative blogosphere take on this move?
Well, generally it is skeptical, but there was one conservative blogger who, out of the gate, was somewhat praiseworthy. Jillian Bandis at townhall.com wrote of Obama. Some thought he would open up a portion of the offshore drilling areas desired by the United States oil companies, but no one thought he would open up this much. Instead of just opening up sections of the southeastern coast or proposing modest expansions to exploration in Alaska, he's gone and proposed drilling in the entirety of Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, and Maryland, except for a small section of water outside of Washington, D.C. No doubt so he can take trip to, I guess there's a... take a trip. I guess the word A was missing. So he can take a trip to the beach unencumbered by any potential environmental damage. That would cramp his style just a little too much. But aside from her, not a lot of love from conservative bloggers. Ian Murray at NRO says it's becoming more and more clear that President Obama's drilling announcement was just hand-waving to distract his opponents from his general anti-energy policies. John Hawkins at Right Wing News. There's no actual drilling for oil that's occurring in Obama's oil drilling proposal. There's just a bunch of vague promises that will undoubtedly never be delivered upon. ... Michelle Malkin wrote, if there was a sincere change of heart and an honest standalone effort to wean America off foreign oil, it would be worth heralding. But as always with this administration, there's a catch. And Sarah Palin took to the pages of National Review online in a blog post. Said, I've got to call it like I see it. The administration's sudden interest in offshore drilling is little more than political posturing designed to gain support for job-killing energy legislation soon to come down the pike. I'm confident GOP senators will not take the bait. Bill, baby Bill, drill baby drill, what's say? I promised you I wasn't going to say that, but it's too funny.
Well, I had my own post on the subject before I get to what I wrote. Most of that vehement negative reaction from the right is exactly what a number of bloggers on the left were throwing up their hands about, saying, once again, here's Obama offering a concession to the right and not getting anything for it. This guy doesn't know how to play basic poker. And I was struck by the fact there are certain bloggers who have taken a very cynical attitude towards Obama from the get-go. But there are other bloggers who I think have been more partial to Obama who also were critical of this decision. So on environmental blogs, of course, there definitely was, mostly criticism. Kate Shepard at Mother Jones saying, so far the deal-making has been largely one-sided, and quoting a number of environmental organizations expressing their dismay. Jonathan Hisks at Grist says, stunning, baffling. With the new policy, Obama appears to be taking a major step towards siding with carbon-polluting industries in the battle to defend the energy status quo. But Oliver Willis, who I think often sides with Obama and is critical of other liberal bloggers when he thinks they're being too hard on him, said it's just a bad idea all around. It won't bring a single GOP vote for environmental legislation, and it pushes moderate and liberal Democrats away. Fail 360. Balloon Juice, John Cole, said, I know we're all hopeless O-bots here who never criticize our cult leader, but someone is going to have to explain the strategy to me before the communal bath. Who'd have known it wouldn't be good enough for the Republicans? They would not treat it as an act of good faith in the negotiating process. I can't be alone of wondering just what TF the White House is doing on this one. But you do also have some bloggers. Andrew Sullivan was practically the meeting place for people arguing that Obama's got a broader strategic game in mind here, and that he's boxing Republicans in by claiming, the all of the above energy ground. He quotes. This is just reader email to Andrew Sullivan. Obama can say, I suggested these actions. These are not in response to some backroom deal. I've taken a comprehensive strategy towards energy procurement and security, and therefore completely owning the high road on the climate bill. In fact, he's already made Boehner look like an intransigent tool. Another writes, Kevin Drum was another more, moderate-ish blogger on the left who was critical of Obama's strategy. Andrew Sullivan's emailer writes, Drum sounds exactly like what folks are saying about Obama's early health care position. I didn't work my ass off in the campaign of Obama race to the middle. If we start in the middle, we have nowhere to go but right. But as you frequently point out, Obama's playing the long game. This isn't a ploy to win a few votes in the Senate. It's proactive politics, reasonable governance. It could actually help us move towards energy independence. So I think this split on the left continues. The left, broadly, Andrew Sullivan is by no means a card-carrying member of the liberal movement. But this debate continues after the health care debate finished. If Obama is not a fighter, always selling out, cashing in his chips too early, or having a broader strategic view that befuddles and marginalizes the folks on the right. My own post on the subject just mentioned, you don't know yet if this is something for nothing or nothing for something. It's possible that he doesn't get Republican votes for the the climate bill is the big kahuna
money for
here.
nothing and your chicks for free, Bill. That's how the song goes.
I almost worked that into the headlines. I thought it might seem a little, oil spills on baby birds was a little too close.
Yeah.
The long game here is the climate bill. That is the end goal of a comprehensive energy strategy that reduces carbon emissions. And if you don't get Republican votes or Democrat votes, there's plenty of Democrats who are on the fence on this bill too. If this doesn't help bring them in, or you get a bill that doesn't do the job, then yeah, it's something for nothing.
Right, and by the way, that's what Sarah Palin said, right? It's little more than political posturing designed to gain support for job-killing energy legislation soon to come down the pike. That this would be a way of setting up, future stuff.
Well, and this strategy was already laid out by John Kerry and Lindsey Graham last year in a New York Times op-ed where they said, we are coming together to try to find a climate compromise where we would cap carbon emissions while also allowing additional offshore drilling and more nuclear power at the same time. And most big environmental organizations, not every single one, has given tacit support for that approach. They'd say, that makes me a little uncomfortable, but if I can do a little more drilling over here in exchange for a broad economy-wide carbon cap that's going to prevent a climate crisis, well, you know what? That's what's most important here. The coastal drilling in and of itself is only a sliver of the broader environmental issue.
But I think the problem,
even though a lot of groups are willing to take that deal, they were not being very conciliatory towards Obama in the wake of this.
Right, and I think it's because this comes on the heel. And by the way, first let me say, although bloggers were generally not enamored by this, the Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell put out a press release, a glowing press release, thanking President Obama for. He's obviously a Republican. For this, and
in Virginia, where the coastline would be opened up.
And so Bob McDonnell put out a press release thanking Obama and very positive. But look, here's the problem: is that on the heels of health care, where Republican senators who, and by the way, every senator thinks they're going to be president, and every senator thinks they should wear a white cloak around. I mean, they've got that mentality. And Republicans really feel slighted by the fact that they passed health care reform through reconciliation. They feel like it was jammed through. It didn't get a single Republican vote. And so people like Lindsey Graham, I think, who really were willing to wheel and deal before, I feel like the well may have been poisoned. I don't know how conciliatory they're going to be now.
Well, this is a test of that. I mean, this and financial reform are going to be the big test whether there really is a long memory if I said Republicans, I'm so mad about health care that I just won't talk to you about the next one. Or they may say, this stuff's going to pass anyway, and I'm not in the room delivering to my state or my donors. Maybe that doesn't really help me so much. If I can actually steer some... if I can help all the oil guys in my state or the nuclear power industry in my state, maybe I want to get in the room here.
I don't know the answer to that. I really don't.
Right.
I don't know how.
Just to add to what I said in my own post, when the drill baby drill stuff was happening in 2008, myself and others were pointing out that the estimates of the amount of oil off the coast is very small and would not actually move us significantly towards energy independence, a point that Obama himself made in the announcement this week. So it's an open question if oil companies are even going to really want to drill here, if it's going to be worth it for them to put in all, because there's a ton of money you have to put into just exploring an area where you don't know if you're going to actually strike oil or not. It may be that the oil lobby wanted to push this issue because if you win on this politically, you drive a stake into the environmental movement, and you don't have to worry about having any serious restrictions put on your carbon emissions. But if it's part of a deal to cap carbon emissions, it's another story. So if you get the broader climate bill, and it may be that the oil companies don't even drill here at the end of the day or do very little drilling in this area. If that's the result, then it's nothing for something, which I imagine is Palin's worst nightmare. And we don't know yet how the oil lobby is going to react to this. Clearly, the Kerry Graham-Lieberman climate compromise effort in the Senate is trying to get the oil lobby on board, and they've offered to them, okay, we won't cap your emissions. We'll put a carbon tax on motor fuels instead, so that'll be a disincentive for people to be wasteful with oil, but we won't really cap your emissions. And they seem to be open to that. They give a fairly polite statement after this announcement. So, it could work. I'm not saying it is going to work, but stranger things have happened in Washington. So, I think there's a lot of game to play here, and I think it's hard to judge how sly or stupid Obama is just yet.
Right, but anybody writing him off hasn't been paying attention. So
that's what sort of strikes me. I mean, Obama's not he's not God. He's not infallible. He makes mistakes here, everybody else. But I would think he has been successful enough that you at least want to take a step back and say, okay, there's something to this. It can't just be like, I just love big oil. I want to give them coastline.
Right.
He must have a game plan.
Gotcha. So let's talk about Arizona, Bill. And let's talk about George Will.
The other big political story over the week was Sarah Palin swooping in to save John McCain from the fierce challenge he's getting from J.D. Hayworth. And even though his primary is not to September?
I think it is. Is it? I think it's August. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong.
Several months away, but Palin was doing a whole media tour with McCain, and that certainly struck an eyebrow with some bloggers on the left. Digby highlighted a post from Charles Pierce, who writes for The Nation and some other places. Pierce wrote, John McCain has flown in Sarah Palin to be the featured speaker at a rally that he hopes will push him to victory over a guy whom even all the other congressional dumbasses thought was a box of rocks. She's endorsing him, but at the rally, he's introducing her. And Digby writes in that he created this monster, and now he's subservient to it. There's some poetic justice in that. Crooks and Liars was highlighting that McCain was excusing Palin for her graphic of congressional districts with crosshairs in them where there are vulnerable Democrats, and shrugging off the time to reload comment from Sarah Palin, while at the same time calling for more bipartisan civility.
And by the way, that is bogus. I mean, let me just put in my 2 cents. Politicians are always talking about targeting voters, which voters they're going to target. I think that sounds threatening.
Would you at least concede that to make an argument for that while at the same time talking about civility in the healthcare debate, is that a little discordant?
I don't know. I mean, here's what I think ultimately it is. Like, Sarah Palin, like I have this thing where I will write something or do something, and I'll have this little voice that says, that's not very politically correct. You could get in trouble if you say this. And either Sarah Palin doesn't have that voice, and maybe that's because she doesn't live in Washington, D.C., and hasn't been around this stuff so much until the last year or two. Or maybe she just doesn't care. But I don't think there was anything at all wrong with what she did. But if I were advising her, I would have said, now, Sarah, this is opening the door that some people can attack you. And some people will think that this is, I know you don't mean this by it, and I know this is really wimpy, and it's unfortunate that we live in a society where you have to be, where there's the thought police and everybody's so sensitive, but we probably shouldn't do this because some people are going to take it the wrong way. So that's kind of how I see it.
Now, obviously the left is just being generally mocking towards the McCain-Palin reunion tour. On the conservative side, are people just happy to see Palin in the spotlight, or is there any complaining that, hey, why are you siding with McCain? McCain's always been a rhino. Why aren't you getting behind J.D. Hayworth, the real conservative in this race?
Honestly, I haven't seen much of that. I'm sure there's some of it. It seems like most of, first of all, a couple of things. One, I think that conservatives have enough races that are interesting, like that they really want to be with, like Marco Rubio, that they're not so focused on the McCain race. Like, the reason to go against McCain is revenge. There's no practical reason to go against McCain, and J.D. Hayworth is not Marco Rubio. This is a guy he's a politician too. I mean, he was in Congress for many years. He was involved in all sorts of stuff, especially the Bush era stuff, like the big spending Bush era stuff. It's not like he's this young, up and coming conservative. And by the way, he's not all that conservative either. I mean, he's conservative. If you think stopping Mexicans from coming into America, if that's your definition of conservative, then yes, he's conservative. But
that's not conservative?
If that's your definition, if that's what conservatism means to you, then you should probably vote for McCain. I'm sorry. Then you should vote for Hayworth versus McCain. But if you think that there are more issues at stake, that there are many issues on the table,
these spending issues,
spending included, yes, Hayworth is not great on those. There's no compelling reason to think that Hayworth is dramatically more conservative than McCain. He's not. I mean, he's not Marco Rubio. I mean, he's not Pat Toomey. I mean, those.
Well, it's interesting if it ends up that Hayworth can't consolidate the conservative base in Arizona, people might credit Palin for that, but it sounds like there's a deeper conflict or a deeper reluctance with Hayworth that goes beyond
absolutely.
Just star power.
And I mean, I wrote a piece for Politics Daily making this point about all the bad stuff about J.D. Hayworth. He came up to me at CPAC, let me know he didn't like that piece very much. I said, hey, here's my card, let's talk. My phone hasn't rang yet. I'm just saying. But it's not just that. The entire Arizona delegation, and I'm talking about dyed-in-the-wool, rock-ribbed conservatives, Trent Franks, I think Kyle, the other senator, Jeff Flake. I mean, all the conservative, elected officials at the federal level, the congressional delegation, they've all lined up behind McCain, just like Sarah Palin has. Again, this isn't Marco Rubio versus Charlie Crist. This isn't Pat Toomey versus Arlen Specter in a primary before he jumped ship. It's much more, and the difference is not in the incumbent so much as the difference is in the challenger. There is no Marco Rubio running. And so, yeah, I mean, I've not seen a lot of conservative bloggers really get excited about this or talk about it. I just think that it's not, look, in a different year, if there wasn't so much going on, if there was a young, up-and-coming conservative who took on McCain, if there was a Marco Rubio, to use that term one more time, John McCain would be in real trouble. But that's not the case. There's no compelling reason.
Well, now, the one conservative who does seem to be trying to pump up Hayworth is George Will, the Washington Post columnist. And this might be less of a blog story than a sort of a new media story, or potential new media story, is my personal opinion. He had a column today essentially just reviewing the race.
It was a pretty even, it was actually a pretty even balanced column, I felt.
No, I think it was subtly slanted towards Hayworth. And just trying to make it be a race, it is a benefit to Hayworth.
Yeah.
And in the online version of the piece, there's a line in it where George Will writes, I just want to make sure I quote it accurately. He says, there Hayworth put his flair for rhetorical fireworks in the service of his favorite causes, to which are stopping illegal immigration and deploring the insufficiencies of McCain's conservatism.
Right.
And that phrase in the online piece directly links to a page on Hayworth's campaign website where he contrasts his pure conservatism with John McCain's awful rhinoism. And I've never seen a journalistic website directly linked to a campaign website. And it's not even, if you want to link to the insufficiencies of McCain's conservatism, you can link to an old George Will column, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's not like it's referencing a campaign site in that.
I agree. I mean, look, I think it's very weird, Bill. You pointed it out. And by the way, I mean, did you sort of discover this, or were other people pointing this out? You pointed it out to me.
This is me. This is me, baby.
Well, look, I give you credit because
I'm the Daily Caller here. I'm the scooper.
This was fascinating. You should actually write about this and call them out. Because I don't think anyone else did. I saw you wrote about it on Twitter. It's interesting. First of all, I'm counting, I think, 7 hyperlinks in this very short column. This is not a long George Will column. I'm counting 7 hyperlinks. First of all, I think that's kind of odd. I mean, I can't imagine that George Will is sitting there putting in hyperlinks himself. I don't even know.
It could be. He has a staff.
Yeah, he has
a
couple people working for him. But, like... so I doubt if George Will himself knows what a hyperlink is. Maybe I'm wrong. Although he does know the 4 pitchers who who each won 20 games for the Baltimore Orioles in the 1970s. I know because I quizzed him on that at an event once, and I think he got Pat Dobson wrong. But the rest, he was solid on Cuellar, Palmer, and McNally.
It could be a Will Stafford. It could be someone at the Washington Post. But, at the end of the day, it's the Washington Post responsibility. Right. That's why it's not a blog. They have editors.
Well, and this piece is really bloggy looking. I mean, the amount of hyperlinks.
Yeah.
It's really, and like, we should go back and look at his past pieces. I mean, normally someone like Will would use a hyperlink sparingly, and it would be used to really cite, like, not like a blogger would. Like, bloggers use hyperlinks like everything, right? But normally it's used very sparingly, and it might be like Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution, and it would link to that, right? It would link to Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution. But here, there are links to like other stories or other. As you mentioned, he links to Hayworth's website. I don't necessarily think it's bad or unethical, but I think it's weird. And I wonder if this really has more to do with the merging of traditional media and blogging.
Well, definitely, I think, and I've seen the New York Times start to do this on certain op-ed pieces too. They are trying to make their online presence to be more bloggish.
I mean, it's almost an argument why you should read it online. Because if you read this on the Dead Tree version of the Washington Post today, you wouldn't get all the information that you get if you read it online because you don't have the hyperlinks.
Right. And if you're going to have an online presence, you might as well use all the extra tools you have there to make it more of an interesting experience. So I think it makes sense. But you better start vetting these links so people don't say, "Hey, you're channeling your readers to one guy's campaign and not the others."
So I mean, but look, here's the thing too. I don't know because I don't know if I would have done that for the Daily Caller. Like, I don't know if I would have linked to the website of Hayworth or not. But I think if I had, it wouldn't have been a big deal. But I'm not George Will, right? And so, maybe he's held to a higher standard or to a different standard than I would be, even though I'm writing for
a publication that's essentially a paper record type paper. I think is held to a higher standard than an opinion journalism site.
But so, do you believe that it's unethical for him to link to Hayworth's website?
I mean, it'd be one thing if it is, I am linking you to Hayworth's website, and I'm telling you that because there's some unique information there that I think is relevant to my story. That's different than saying as a demonstration of fact that McCain is insufficiently conservative, and the evidence of that is Hayworth's website.
He should have linked to my piece. My piece would have totally done the job. Bill, I think you should write about this. And if you don't write about this, tell me, and I probably will, and I'll steal your thunder. But seriously, this is an interesting thing. It's an interesting topic, and I think you could get some play out of it. So I would encourage you to write about it. Good eye, good get.
Thank you
on catching that one. Fascinating.
Well, should we call it a day, sir?
You've done it again. You've wasted another perfectly good hour with Click and Clack.
And I'm going to talk to you again this week for my radio show, Liberal Oasis Radio Show podcast.
Yeah, everyone should tune in.
That'll be uploaded at liberaloasis.com on Saturday. We'll talk tomorrow.
You got it, man. I look forward to it, and we will see you next week on The Week and Blog. Have a good day. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.